yours truly asked, because I had one question. I went in there with one thing that I wanted to know about. It is the first time that Art Rooney and Mike Tomlin get to build around a quarterback in 20 years. Are they going to do it? Is that the top priority? You hear it all the time. What's going on? Like, you got to build around a quarterback. I think everybody's got the same question. Are you going to do what the Bengals did? Are you going to do what the Dolphins did? Is that the plan of attack? So I asked straight up, are you going to, is building around Kenny top priority? He came back and hit me with, like I said before, I think we have a lot of good young players on offense. We may have a lot of pieces around him that we need. Now, you can always use another piece, and we'll be looking for the other pieces. But I think we have a pretty good young group there. We'll have an opportunity in this draft that we've got some high draft picks we can utilize. In general, I think what we're bringing back next year. In general, I like what we're bringing back next year on offense. Immediately, my mind went, well, Jordan Addison's not coming to the Steelers. That was my first thought. I was just like, well, that's not what you're going to do. And then he went on a little bit later. Somebody asked him about the offensive line, and he said, I think that we did get better as the season went on, and that's encouraging, but we're not going to say we can't improve. I mean, we're going to look for ways to improve. I think overall consistency is something we can do better with. We had some guys that were a little inconsistent, and we've got to do better in that regard. I don't know. My mind immediately went, maybe I'm wrong here. Jordan Addison is not the guy. It's possibly going to be an offensive tackle, and I would say offensive line is where they're going to hammer on offense this offseason.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I mean, we got some new, some new faces kind of at the top of the pecking order in the front office with, Andy Weddle and then Omar Khan with Colbert's retirement post-draft last year.
Dude, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no, you're good.
Art said something like, oh, things are changing the way that Omar and Andy do the draft process. And somebody's like, can you give us an example? And he was like, I'll just let them do the talking. I was like, all right, sounds good. You got nothing.
I mean, that's definitely going to be, something to watch for, like how their philosophies change. And I'm excited about that aspect of it, the unknowns, us figuring out kind of their tendencies and things like that. I do think that the offensive line class in general is probably like average to below average. We're not going to see near the amount of first round offensive linemen that we saw last year. I think there was like 8 or 9
there was a
linemen
lot
taken in the first round last year. That's not going to happen this year. I think it's probably more likely to be about 4, maybe 5. But overall, I mean, there are still some guys that I really like and guys that I think that could help them even year one. I do think that the Steelers are in a unique situation, though, because it's really not often that you bring back all like 10, 11 of your starters, but that's really where the Steelers are at. I mean, technically the slot receiver is a starter because of how much 11 personnel they play. And like, I don't think that Steven Sims is going to be the starter next year in that spot. So maybe 10 out of 11, but you do get the sense that this is going to be what they finished the season with last year is going to be the meat and potatoes of their offense next year. They probably still do need to upgrade at least one piece on the offensive line, whether that be left guard, left tackle, and then they're going to get a slot receiver at some point during the offseason as well. But I think that he talked a lot about, finishing the season strong and that kind of upward trajectory that he felt like they were on. They're going to try to use that combined with the youth that they have on that side and just hope that natural progression kind of helps them take, themselves over the top.
Do you think that there's enough natural progression left though with those two guys? It's really just Dan Moore and Kevin Dotson. That's the only ones we got to worry. Like even if Chooks is maxed out, he's here. There's no questions there. He's the right tackle. It's the other two. It's the other side of the offensive line. But this is year 3, year 4 for Kevin Dotson. Like how much better can you get? How much more progression can you have?
Yeah, I still think in order for this to, because here's the deal too, like with Canada being brought back, and we've talked at length about that decision. I know he talked about that a little bit as well yesterday or the day before, but I definitely think the expectation for this offense has to be that it's going to be a good offense. Like it can't just be below, like it's been below average to bad most like the entire time he's been here. They have to be good in order for
Yeah.
like Canada
Yeah.
to get
Good
another
would be
year.
good.
So we need to see like a good jump from this group and build off how they finish the season. And I think in order to do that, you still need an upgrade on the offensive line. Like I'm not
Yeah.
saying that it's absolutely a necessity that they have to upgrade over both of those two guys, but I think you need to upgrade one of the spots and then add like another dynamic receiver, particularly one that can play in the slot. And I think they're going to have the draft capital to do so. It's just a matter of, making sure the board falls where they need to.
You know the draft board better than most. Do you see, like, if they wait, how far can they wait it out before you're like, okay, they have completely screwed themselves on an
Yeah.
offensive lineman?
On offensive linemen, I think that there's a chance that Broderick Jones is there at 17. I'd be pretty surprised if Paris Johnson was, but
you don't think you could go past 17 before it's like a dramatic fall off?
mm, I mean, those are definitely like the top names that I like. I mean, I'm a little bit higher on Darnell Wright from Tennessee. Like, I think
Yeah.
he's definitely a top 50 guy. I've already talked about Harrison from Oklahoma, left tackle. The interior line class is not great. It's a little difficult to find like a center that I feel really good about going in the top like 100. There's probably only one center that's going to be selected that high. Even guards, like I consider Skoronski a guard, and I would have no hesitation with the Steelers taking him if he was there at 17. He's played left tackle his entire career basically at Northwestern, but I think the arm length, he's only got like 32-inch arms, and that's going to be below, that's going to be a historic outlier for the position. And I'm just not sure if NFL teams are going to be willing to make that kind of risk in the early portion of the draft. But I definitely think he can play guard, and I think he'll be a freaking good one too. So, I mean, if the Steelers kind of fell themselves in and like he fell into their laps, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'd be down for that too. So
Yeah.
I don't necessarily I try to make sure that I'm not getting myself like pigeonholed or like hyper fixated on a single position that they need to take first, just because for one, we still got free agency too. So like, we don't even really know what the roster is going to look like come April. And then I just think that that's like something we do sometimes a little bit too much, like maybe in the media or fan base wise, just get like too focused and fixated on one player or one position. Like there's a lot of ways to make this thing work. And even though I do think that the draft overall, like at certain positions, like receiver is not as good as it's been in the past couple of seasons, I do think that there are still good players to be had, even if they don't get their hands on like Jordan Addison at 17. There's a lot of ways they can go and still, come away with a good product at the end of, draft weekend.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about wide receiver. Like a good wide receiver would be fine. But if you added a mid-tier wide receiver to start in the slot and then hope for the best in Calvin Austin and then, kept Steven Sims and kept Gunnar Olszewski, and, I think you can make that work and it'll be just fine. Plus you have Connor Hayward, who's pretty much a slot guy as it is. Pat Fryermuth's a guy that could bounce out. You got to get another tight end in there somehow because those two are practically wide receivers as it is. Offensive line is a concern for me. But again, just like you said, free agency is a real thing. That's how they built it last year. Wouldn't be surprised if they did it again this year. Like if you're going to toss money around there, you might as well go toss it out there, get some really good left tackle. That's proven to work for many teams in the past. I mean, you could look at everybody literally everybody in the championship games this weekend, and at least half of them, I guess 2 out of 4. So really, no, maybe just one. Is it really just Trent Williams? Am I trying to make a point about signing left tackles? And it's
Jonah Williams, he wasn't. I mean, he was a guy that the Bengals drafted.
They drafted him, and then so did Lane Johnson was drafted in Philly.
Yeah, I mean Philly's always invested at that position too. But I think that you can make that argument a couple different ways, right? Like I think that there's not just one way to bake a cake when it comes to like roster building.
Yeah.
But I think that I see this argument a lot on Twitter. You can't take a receiver that high. They need to, invest first in the offensive line. Well, like the truth of the matter is, man, once you get to this point in the season where we're talking about conference championship teams, divisional round teams, usually those teams have both.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah.
you can even look at the teams that are playing this weekend.
Yeah,
San Francisco's offensive line is really good. They got probably one
crazy
of the
good.
best overall players in football, Trent Williams. They're going up against Philly, who has a top two at worst offensive line. Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson, guys that they've invested in and developed.
Yeah.
Um, even Cincinnati, like they went out and spent a bunch of money last season,
Yeah.
and they've had some success. Kansas City has an elite offensive line, but I also think you can make the point that all those teams have high tier weaponry, except maybe Kansas City. They got a lot of different flavors, maybe
Dude, but
not.
even Kansas City, they got the best tight end in football, and they went
Yeah,
out and spent some money on guys like
getting
Juju
Juju, yeah.
Smith-Schuster and 7 different running backs to make sure that they had options.
And you look at what some of those decisions to go out and get some of these playmakers have done for their young quarterbacks. Like, it's funny to think about, but like during the draft process last year, everybody was thinking that Philadelphia was stockpiling all these picks. They got 2 first-round picks this year. Everybody was like,
Yeah.
well, they're doing that just in case they got to go get a quarterback because Jalen Hurts not the guy.
No.
They go draft Devontae Smith last year, and then they go make the trade for AJ Brown, and boom, Hurts explodes. He's an MVP candidate. Now we're talking about giving him $50 million a year on a contract extension. So,
With 2 draft picks.
yeah, and then you look at Cincinnati; they're back-to-back AFC Championship games. They got the best receiver core overall in the league, one through three. San Francisco's weaponry. No disrespect to Brock Purdy, but between him and Kyle Shanahan, that's an embarrassment of riches over there with George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
There's more ways to get this done, and just I think a lot of times it's semantics on how you get there, like what you should prioritize first. And I definitely get the arguments for both sides. I'm just saying, like, when we talk about trying to get the Steelers to play again this weekend, conference championship weekend, you're going to need both. Like, it can't just be one or the other. So,
Yeah.
unless you got an
very
elite
true.
quarterback, and then it might be a little different.
And the
But
Steelers don't have any of the 3. So
not yet, yeah.
Yeah. So they are definitely in trouble. But I will say this: I think that the Steelers have weapons. Like they have, if you're gonna nitpick on one of them, walking into 2023, I feel pretty good about the combination of George Pickens, Deontay Johnson.
They got a good base.
They got a good base. Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, Pat Freiermuth. I mean, Connor Hayward proved to be a pretty good pass catcher out there. It's a good base. It is definitely a good base that in a year, maybe at the end of this year, this upcoming season, you feel are like, oh, okay, well, some of these guys are elite. Like some of these guys have entered that territory where that's where I think that you could toss a left tackle ahead or an interior lineman ahead of a skill position, because if you're baking the cake, you have the base, and your glaring weakness is not Steven Sims. It's penalties on the offensive line and sacks,
Yep.
And Kenny will help that. I think that's a big thing that has to be misunderstood, or that it is misunderstood, is that Kenny's second year, he'll get hit a lot less because he'll do a lot smarter things with the football, and that'll help the offensive line. And I think we'll see improvements either way, whether they make a change or not. But I think that you gotta make a change. You have to make a change.
I do want to answer this question from Miguel.
Yeah, do it up.
Thoughts on the tight end position? Do you still see the Steelers drafting a tight end in the top 100? Was Zach Gentry a free agent? I mean, anything's possible. The tight end position is actually really good this year. Normally, we only get like a couple starting caliber tight ends, but I think that the position this year is pretty solid, and I think that there's going to be probably 4, maybe even 5 that go in the top like 50 to 70 picks. So, there's a lot of names out there. Michael Mayer is the top guy, I think, in this class. But I did a scouting report on Darnell Washington. If you're from Georgia, if you're interested in that, you can check out the NFL draft tab.
Dude, I just want to go interview a guy who's a foot.
Oh
taller
yeah, he's
taller than me.
He's on my list for the combine, man. I've already got a couple guys that I've really enjoyed, like film wise, that I have specific questions for, and Washington's going to be one of those guys. But there's other players too, like past that. Like I've talked a lot about Dalton Kincaid, who caused a big uproar because Daniel Jeremiah had him as tight end 1 yesterday on Twitter, and it was
did he really?
Out. But I have talked about him a lot at length on the draft pod. But he's a excellent receiver, man. Like the dude just gets open and he never drops passes. He dropped 2 passes like his entire time at Utah. He he had like a 200 and something, like 260 or something like that game against USC this past season. That was unreal. He's an awesome player. Guys like Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave is going to be at the Senior Bowl. So there's a lot
Oh,
of
that's a
talent.
good
I
one,
don't know
actually.
if the Steelers are going to be willing to pay that kind of price,
No, they're
but
not. They're not.
but I,
Let's
but
be
I do
honest.
think but I do think the position itself offers a bunch of talent.
I agree, but I don't think that I would see if I could see the Steelers. I think Zach Gentry is going to come back. If I had to put my money on a move, I would say that Zach Gentry doesn't have many targets right now. I bet you there's not a bunch of teams out there looking at him saying we're going to pay Zach Gentry a boatload of money. He fits well in Pittsburgh's offense. He's going to get more passing targets here than anywhere else because Matt Canada loves his Zach Gentry tight end screen. Loves it. He cuddles with it at night. He feels real good about it. I would imagine Zach Gentry comes back. And I feel good about that. I think Zach Gentry is good for what he does here. But if they didn't, it would be cool to get a flashy tight end. It's been a minute, like Pat Freiermuth was a good one, but you kind of saw that one coming. Before Pat, it was a long time of Ladarius Greens, Nick Vanette's, Vance McDonald's, just filling the void anywhere that you could possibly go.
Yeah,
It feels
it's hard to get a tight end, man. Like I said,
it is.
we don't get very many starting caliber tight ends, and that's just because even like we've seen Pat, struggle in the blocking department. But I mean, that's the norm these days. Like a
Yeah,
lot of these guys, they grow up with 7-on-7 football. Many of them when they're in college, are basically detached receivers, playing a
yeah,
lot in the
exactly.
slot, playing a lot out wide.
Yeah, there's always the Zach Gentry to a Pat Freiermuth in college too.
Yeah.
Like there's always the guy that they'll just send it because in college you don't have to disguise it as well as you do in the NFL. Like you'll just toss him out there and be like, okay, you're 6'8", 270 pounds. You are doing nothing but blocking, and that is your job here at Penn State. And then Pat Freiermuth, like you said, is just basically a detached wide receiver. I agree.
Yeah.
It would be cool though. I'd be all about that life. Tight ends are always my last thing I'll say about tight ends. Always my favorite interviews. Always super nice guys. I've never met a mean tight end in my entire. People have bad things to say about Vance McDonald. He was nothing but nice to me whole time he was there. So no issues with tight ends. I'm all about tight ends.